Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adventures in History. Hope you're having a good one. It's been a weird day. Not a bad day, but definitely not the day that I thought that it was going to be when I set out this morning. Um, yeah, anyway. PMAT, what's up? Psychical, how's it going? Theo. um, if I were successfully able to indoctrinate people, uh, that would be actually pretty great. I would appreciate my job a lot more. It's almost impossible to like actually indoctrinate somebody in a semester. Uh, the best that I can do is hope that I can help them have a single thought that they came up with themselves from beginning to end. If I can do that, I call it a win. Because if you can do it once, you can probably do it again. Totally something you would have said in high school. Yeah. High school is actually way different than college when it comes to a teacher's ability to impact a student. If I have a student in high school for 5 hours a week, I can get way more accomplished in the whole indoctrination thing than I can in 3 hours a week every other day, right? Like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or 3 hours a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, in like an hour and a half each day, right? So, what's up, Matt? Aloha, Frank. You have a history question? Yeah, hit me with it. Howdy. What's up, Uncle Bill? How's it going, man? Clipped out of context. I don't even know what you were clipping, Moose, but go for it. One teacher that helped me come up with an original opinion gave the formula fact plus interpretation equals support and required we use it in our papers. That's actually not so bad. That's pretty good logic where you are able to not just say something but say why you say something, and you're not just saying something completely randomly, you're saying it within the boundaries of trying to make a point, right? So I dig that, actually. That's quite good. When the barter system phased out and monetary tradition was established, I wonder, was there an alternative to coins? Yeah, I mean, people used stuff that wasn't coins all over the place. Um, the first version of money, as we kind of understand it, were these little clay items, these little bead-looking things, but they represented certain types of goods. And you would, to make a contract, you'd go to usually a priest at the temple, and you would make your deal in front of the priest, and they would take your little piece of token clay thingy that represented your goods, like baskets, right? I'm going to give you so many baskets, and you're going to give me so many baskets full of wheat at the harvest time, right? So I'm going to put my little tokens representing my baskets in this little clay envelope thing, and you're going to put your little tokens representing how much food in the little clay envelope thing, and then the priest is going to seal up this little clay envelope thing and stamp it and make two copies of it, and you get one and I get one. And then when it's time for our contract to like fulfill itself, like after the harvest, we'd go to the priest and we would both break open our little clay envelope things, and we'd count the things inside and we'd settle up. So that's called bulai, or a bulas. And that was pretty much money for a long time. It was just symbolic pieces of clay. And the priest would write on the outside of the little thing, like what was inside of it. And eventually they just got the idea, like, we don't have to do the whole, like, little clay envelope thing. We could just write it out and have a priest sign it, and then the priest keeps it. and this is basically what became a contract, as we understand it. But yeah, there have been lots of different. So if it's a coin, it's obviously, you know, money. But there are these other things that are called mediums of exchange, where we have sort of set amounts of value, and we understand exactly how much this thing is worth. Like last week when we were talking about Aztec as a culture, they had mediums of value set around like cacao beans and certain amounts of bolts of fabric. So you knew how much this thing was worth in relation to how many cacao beans it was, or how many bolts of fabric it was worth. Or another one of their things was a jaguar costume. So if you could make the clothes for a warrior, like a jaguar costume, that was sort of like a medium of exchange. You knew kind of how much that was worth because of the labor that went into it. So yeah, there are a lot of things that people have used for monetary purposes that were not just gold, silver, bronze, etc. So lots of that stuff, lots and lots of that stuff. You use human skulls as currency. It's pretty metal. Did the Aztec play lizard men in Warhammer? I don't know what they played in Warhammer. They are very imperial. I don't know if they'd serve the God Emperor, but they're pretty high up there. They're highly organized, and they have a very regimented social structure. So maybe the Empire. Are they called Space Marines? Is that what they're called? I think. Or Terrans? I can't. I'm very, very, very unfamiliar with the larger Warhammer 40k world. I know a little bit that I've picked up kind of along the way, but I've never played it. I don't know basically any of the lore. And if I'm being honest, I'm not 100% convinced that I need to care about the lore, but there are many people that would say that about how much I know about Tolkien, so, right. The lizard men in Warhammer Fantasy are Mesoamerican stylistically. Interesting. Did not know that. I don't know if I've ever seen pictures of lizard men, or if I have, I don't recall any. So, all right, and of course, here we go. Here's a picture. Yeah, that's vaguely Mesoamerican. I can see it. Like I think the thing that's giving it away is the reliance on geometric pattern. I think that's sort of one of the big things. This remarkably Aztec. A lot of their decorations are just very intricate stylistic geometric patterns. So that's definitely within the realm of potential. What's up, Chocobo? They're your favorite. Okay. Oh, well, I mean, they've got big pyramids. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty straightforward Mesoamerican stuff. Yeah. They're trying to make it Aztec and Maya at the same time, and it kind of hurts my brain because I'm looking at some of that going, oh, that particular pyramid style is Maya, but they've got it decorated like an Aztec pyramid, and my brain is just like finding the cognitive dissonance where I want to like twitch and go like, no, it's not right. But it's a fantasy world, so it can be whatever it wants to be. What's up, Claudio? Okay, so we're doing viewer requests night tonight. This is something that viewers voted on. Last week we did Aztec history, and in the process of choosing a viewer request topic, viewers decided let's just do the mythology of it. And it's pretty cool stuff, and I'm actually quite looking forward to discussing it with you all. It's very interesting and very involved. Of all of the Mesoamerican mythology stuff, we probably know more about the Aztec stuff than we do just about any of the other groups. Part of that is because of their encounters with Europeans, but even without the Europeans, they left behind a lot of really wicked cool mythology. For all of the bad things Games Workshop does, they've been doing much better in representation. Well, that's cool. Glad you could catch this since you missed the other Aztec stream. The VOD is still there. I know it's not the same. Also, Kyle, welcome in. So you can go watch that if you want to, but I get that the interaction is different. Seeing it live is not the same as watching the VOD. Aztecs did not build ships that went out on the sea. They would build small boats that would sail around on the lakes or the rivers, but we're not going out and building like an Aztec navy. They didn't really have that. Most Native American groups are not going to have anything that approaches the concept of a ship. Most of them are going to be boats that are going to just sort of float around on lakes or rivers or right around the coastline. Not anything approaching like sailing out into open water. They had, especially the Maya and the Aztec, had at least the beginnings of the understandings of where they were on the surface of the earth. So this would have been like stuff that would have eventually led them to things like latitude and longitude had they started doing a lot of sea navigation, and they could definitely navigate via the stars even on land. So they had the elements of that, and I don't think it would have been too much longer before they got to that point. But of course, Europeans showed up with all of their sicknesses and ailments and guns, and that was the end of it, right? This is the biggest misconception that the public has about the Aztecs. That's a great question. I don't actually know. That they were just like super interested in blood. I don't know. Maybe that's it. I mean, they were a warrior culture and they were a war empire, and they definitely kept slaves and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that their entire culture was like just blood. I mean, it was a lot of blood, and we're going to talk about a lot of goofy stuff tonight that involves like chopping up your family members. You know, it's rough, but like, I mean, they had a very rich and very diverse culture. They had a very regimented social class structure. They had a very, very in-depth religious pantheon. They had a thriving economy, long-distance trade, you know. Barges and galleys. Probably nothing like... I mean, they don't have anything like that or triremes. Did they know that the Earth was round? That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if they knew that or not. It wouldn't surprise me if they did, but I don't know if they did or if they don't or if they didn't. That's a great question, Chocobo. That's great. I mean, I don't know everything. I never claimed to know everything, right? Surprised that the native population didn't have diseases that equally repelled the visitors. You know, that's an interesting question, Moose, and it does look like syphilis was potentially like reverse broadcast to Europe. Like they brought over stuff like syphilis, and then in the populations of America, syphilis mutated somehow, and then it got brought back to Europe. Because like there were really, really big syphilis outbreaks in Europe right after this, and I think some of it's been traced back to potentially New World mutations of the syphilis situation. So I don't know, maybe, but like they didn't have the flu or the cold stuff that affected Europeans at the same level. So it's really interesting that they didn't. But this is population genetics, right? The longer that you're around something, the more likely you are to be immune to it. And the populations of the New World had been severed from the population of the Europeans by that point for about... Let's see, this is where we're going to start getting into debates about where the populations actually start splitting. But theoretically, as far back as 100,000 years... potentially more credibly 80,000 years, or maybe even 50,000 years. It really just depends on when you think the people that came over to America had their last contact with the people that ended up over in Europe. So If the Earth was round, I could see England from the Netherlands with binoculars. If the Earth was flat, you could see it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but people are convinced, and it's hard to get people to change their mind, especially if they've started building their worldview and their paradigm and their identity around these ideas, even if they're false. It's hard to get people to kind of admit that they are not acting wisely. We'll just say it that way. All right, so let's get into some of this stuff and talk a little bit about how the Aztec people viewed the world and how they explained things, and we'll talk a little bit about some kind of basic generic mythology things and how that affected their day-to-day lives, and then we'll kind of hit some of the big figures towards the end of the stream. Where do they think that everything came from? Well, originally they thought that the universe was just kind of chaotic and there's just all of this stuff going around, and there wasn't really like matter or mass or anything like that. It was just this idea of Teotl, and I described this extensively on Thursday last week, but basically if you weren't here on Thursday last week, Teotl is just this sort of force that makes everything, that is involved in the creation of everything. It is the force and the power that binds everything together, but also what makes it fall apart. It's all about rejuvenation. It focuses on a lot of things like your cycle of life, where you are born and you die and then you decay. Claire shows up with the biddies. Thank you again, Claire, and welcome in. Does Atlantis exist in Aztec mythology? According to the Marvel universe, yeah, but no. There's not really an Atlantis myth in the Aztec stuff. Is it true that most Native American civilizations were far more hygienic than their European counterparts? Some of this stuff is wrapped up in like the noble savage idea that came out during the Enlightenment. Like late 1500s, you start seeing these people writing about how different they are, and then by the time you get to the 1700s and all of the politics of Europe is kind of falling apart, you get these people writing all this stuff about Native Americans that is not really accurate about Native Americans. They're kind of using Native Americans as a foil against the problems of European aristocracy or European culture, European greed, etc. So, I mean, if you're talking about like how frequently they bathed, I don't know if we have the data to know like how many times the average Aztec person took a bath compared to the average European person at the same time. I think what a lot of that cleaner stuff came from were these pamphlets that became very, very popular, and these short little like travel logs that became very popular in Europe, where people would describe Native American habits and practices, and they would talk about stuff like sweat lodges and smoke baths and things like that. And people were like, oh, well, everybody over in the New World is just super duper clean and we're all dirty. I don't know if we can necessarily say that they were absolutely somehow cleaner. I think that a lot of that has to do with stereotyping, and a lot of that has to do with improper understanding of the actual culture of the people of the New World, and the bias that the Europeans had both against them and for their own culture. Sounds like they were pretty close. Maybe. I don't know. Soap? Just the invention of soap? I don't actually know if the Aztec used soap. That's a great question, though. So, hey, Claudio. You popped in earlier, right? I said hello, but hey again. What's up? Europeans didn't bathe like once a month. It depends on where you go, right? There are different people that do different things. saying European is a bit of a catch-all that doesn't apply because, I mean, Europe is a small continent by comparison, but it's incredibly culturally diverse, right? So it's hard to just say Europeans do this. Some, sure, maybe, but others, maybe not, right? Path of Exile. I think that's your new addiction there, right? Anyway, in this thing called Teotl, if we're going back to our discussion, there is a god named Ometeotl. And I showed this picture last week. Ometeotl is frequently depicted as a pair of deities, and this is because Ometeotl has both a male and a female aspect. Ometeotl, as its unified form, doesn't have sex or gender. It's just a god. And it sort of popped into existence without being created. So it was just like the first thing, which is kind of interesting. It wasn't spawned out of nothing, but neither was it created. It just was. So it wasn't, and then it was. But Ometeotl does have a will and has a lot of power. And according to various stories here, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about what is actually their ideology. So originally, the Aztec people were not just one group. They were several city-states that all had the similar kind of culture, Mexica culture. And they all had slightly different variations on their mythology, which means that in a lot of these situations, you read one account of mythology and it disagrees with another account of mythology. And this has a lot to do with the time period that it was written down or recorded and the person giving the account. So there are actually several different versions of the universal creation account, but there is a later version that shows up right around the time of the height of the Aztec Empire, which is in the 1460s, 1470s AD, and you start seeing an attempt at making like a unified vision where the leadership of the Aztec had become dominant based around their capital city at Tenochtitlan. So you have a central authority now, and with that you can kind of smooth out a lot of the wrinkles. So that's what I'll share with you today, but do know that if you read older versions of Aztec stuff, especially for the height of the empire, the details might be a little bit different. The individuals doing some of these actions might be a little bit different, but this is kind of like the easier way to approach it. So the story is that Ometeotl made 4 different gods, and we're going to talk about each one of these later on. But for the purposes of the story, he made these 4 gods, and he divided up the existing material into 4 kind of quadrants and gave each of them control over a quadrant. But then they all started arguing about who got to be the sun, because obviously the sun is like super duper important. You want to be the sun, and you want all of the humans that you have created to look to you and worship. So there's the first sun, but it doesn't go over very well because he was only part of a god. He had his foot bitten off by a crocodile. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. And one of the gods got really sick that the sun was so weak, so he went up and he knocked his brother out of the sky with a big war club and made himself the sun. So now we have a new sun. He turned the first guy into a jaguar, and as punishment, the jaguar guy got all of the other jaguars on Earth to go around and eat all the humans. So we have this big event where the sun was dark, it fell out of the sky, all these jaguars showed up, ate all the humans, and then we get a new sun. Well, the new sun like made humans again and got really excited about this, but the old sun was upset still and used his magic to turn all of the humans into monkeys. And at that point, the second son kind of like gave it up because he realized that he was never going to be able to maintain being the son with this brother of his constantly causing issues. So now we have a third son, and this is actually a god that they had created after the fact. So the settlement is like, okay, well, if one of us big four gods can't be the sun, we should get one of the other gods to be the sun. We talked about this guy a little bit on Thursday. This god's name is Tlaloc, and he's technically the god of rain. I thought I had a picture of him. I guess I don't. Anyway, Tlaloc becomes the god of the sun, but he's the god of rain. And because he's the god of rain, and he's stuck up in the sky being the sun, he can't rain. And the earth gets really, really dry, and all of the humans that get remade start griping to him and, basically saying, you suck. You're like the worst sun ever. You're drying everything out, and you're supposed to rain. And so he gets really mad at them, and he's like, okay, well, if you want rain, I'll give you rain. So he rains fire on the entire earth and burns and scorches everything to ash and kills all the humans again. So then they were like, okay, well, obviously the problem is we have all these angry men trying to be the sun. So what we need to do is we need to get a woman to be the sun. So they pick Tlaloc's wife, who is the goddess of like rivers and lakes, and her name is Chalchuitlicu. So they put Chalchuitlicu as the sun, but then the people like start actually liking her because she's doing pretty okay, and the gods get jealous, so they run around and convince all of the humans that she's actually a horrible sun. So the humans get mad and start cursing her for being a bad sun and saying that they don't actually love her. So then she gets really upset because she thought she was doing a good job, and she cries for 52 years straight and floods the entire earth, and all the humans die. So they just like have a bad go of it. So at that point, they're like, look, we all need to kind of step away from this, and we need to find a completely new god whose only job it is to be the sun, and we'll put the sun in the sky, and we'll remake humans. And the god that decides to remake the humans is this guy. This is Quetzalcoatl, and we'll talk about him again a little bit later. He was the second of the sons. He's one of the first four. But he decides that he needs to remake humanity. So he goes down to the underworld, and he steals a whole bunch of bones. Because at this point, humans had pretty much done nothing but died like the whole time, right? And he steals the bones from this guy. This is Mictlantecutli. So Mictlantecutli is the god of the underworld and the god of the dead, and ends up getting bones stolen from him. So Quetzalcoatl remakes humans. They make a new sun. They put it in the sky. And things more or less stabilize at that point. But this is kind of their story of how the universe gets made. And it's this horrible thing of like humans dying all the time and getting eaten by animals and burned and flooded. And you can see a lot of the hallmarks of a good creation story in this. Somebody popped in. Moose 2271. What's going on, man? Welcome in. Humans are having a rough time of it. Yeah, they are. Sexism started in early human... Dude, sexism is pretty old. Pretty old. That's a long time, but maybe not to a god, right? Exactly. That she just had a bad go of things for 52 years and flooded the earth, right? So that's kind of how the humans show up and how the earth gets made. So humans got remade like 10 times because the gods were being petty. Yeah, but I mean, that's not so far outside of our normal mythological experience, right? The humans are always like second fiddle to the whims of the gods. and they're always sort of the pawns on the chessboard of the gods' larger chicanerous activity, right? So, anyway, things calm down, and then they get to having more gods and making more gods and doing lots of other things. But the pantheon here that the Aztec have is really, really broad, and they have dozens and dozens and dozens of gods and goddesses, way more than I could ever cover in just an hour and a half stream here. A lot of their gods are very highly specialized, and because their class structure in the Aztec Empire was so specialized, everybody kind of had their own patron deity. So if you were a stone worker or a metalsmith or a person that worked with gemstones or a basket weaver or a person that did trade or farmed, you had your own individual god or goddess that was your patron deity that you could offer supplication and sacrifice to for better fortune. They had gods of healing and, of course, all of the things that you would expect in a big pantheon. Goddesses of childbirth, protector spirits of the home, gods of war, gods of the storms, all of these things. And it was very, very involved. And one of the things that's kind of interesting here and does give us an interesting window into the history of the Aztec people is that some of these gods start off one way and they get other things attached to them over time. And this is evidence that they were probably not in the larger Aztec pantheon originally. They were one of the smaller gods from one of the other Mexica tribes, or maybe from one of the other cities, or they may have even been gods from other people that weren't Aztec, like the Toltec. There's a lot of evidence that Quetzalcoatl wasn't actually an Aztec god originally, that he was the patron god of Tlaloc, which was the capital city of the Toltec Empire. So there's a lot of syncretism going on here, and there's a lot of evolution of story over time. But this is, again, shouldn't be surprising. If we even look at like Greek theology or mythology, right? There are various different phases of Greek mythology. You have the Titans, and then the new gods show up on Olympus, and then you have recasting of Greek gods, and then the Roman stuff comes in and sort of like adds another layer to that and recasts them yet again. So our concept of the Greek gods is really just sort of a sanitized version that gets collected usually in the 1800s by people in Europe and published as stuff like Bulfinch's mythology, right? So the Aztec pantheon and mythology should not be taken as somehow underdeveloped just because it's a New World group. And I say that to you all, and I don't think that anybody in the chat room is thinking that, but there are still a lot of biases towards Native American peoples, even in like academic history. There's been a recent resurgence in a lot of people, especially local Native American archaeologists doing Native American archaeology, that has been absolutely fascinating, but they've had a lot of trouble attracting money from the existing groups because, like, if you want to go dig stuff up now in Belize, they want to have a state archaeologist on your dig, which means that they're going to be able to control what you do, what you take, what actually happens. Are going to be able to observe the excavation of everything, right? But that doesn't sit very well with a lot of these larger universities because they're used to just sort of getting their way, right? People just think that they were stupid. They do. They absolutely. And this is even something that we've handled a little bit in stream. I don't know how many of you have been around since like the beginning of me streaming, but there were a couple of times where we would talk about Native American stuff, and I would say things like they were accelerating on a faster trajectory than the Greeks or the Romans, and that would just sit very badly with people. But if you look at it, and I can explain this to you all, and I think that you all can understand it. If you take when, like, the first moment that a human being set foot in this area, right? Okay. and then you go to the height of their civilization. If we're talking about people like the Aztec, the first time somebody set foot in Aztec territory was probably around 20,000 BC, right? About 20,000 years ago. So in the span of 21,000 years, they went from minute population hunter-gatherers to incredibly advanced, highly systematized economic groups with written language, highly developed pantheon, massive ability to coordinate labor, monumental architecture, etc. All right, so that was 21,000 years. If you look at the first time a human being set foot in Greece, that was probably about 50-ish thousand years ago. So on the same timeline, that would mean that the Greeks would need to be making monumental architecture by 30,000-ish BC. And they weren't. They didn't start building monumental architecture until the Mycenaeans showed up about 2,300 BC. So, I mean, even if you want to claim the Minoans, you're pushing it back to like 2,600 BC. So it took them about 47,000 years. Now, that's not saying that they're stupid, but on the same timeline, it took them a lot longer to get to the same level of civilization. And I don't know, I get kind of ticky about this stuff because I see this as amazing, right? Aliens. Yeah, it was just obviously aliens, right? They were probably not rated as much as Europeans in the Mediterranean. Psychical, that is absolutely false. The people in Central America were just as active with beating the crap out of each other as the Greeks were. Just as active. There were people thousands of years before the Aztec beating the crap out of each other in Mesoamerica, and they had just as much problem with migration. I mean, if you were with us on Thursday, the Aztec themselves were actually a migrant group that came in and beat the crap out of the Toltec. So, yeah, but I mean, if we're just talking about their neighbors, it was their neighbors, right? But if we're also saying that the Greeks didn't benefit from the culture of being around those people and that expanded their knowledge of what was going on, right? You know, if the Greeks had been isolated and had never met, say, the Phoenicians, would they have ever developed their own writing? I don't know, maybe. So there's a bit of a push and a pull there. And I'm not trying to poop on the Greeks. I love the Greeks. I've been to Greece. I've walked around in their ancient sites and taken thousands of pictures. I love that stuff. I'm not trying to say anything negative about them. I'm just trying to compare their timeline with the Native American people's timeline, right? So that's what I was trying to get at. All right. But the reason I talk about this organization stuff is because once they developed this big pantheon, they start applying it to basically their worldview, right? And how they even divided stuff like their time is directly linked to their mythological views. So the year was divided into 4 parts. And if we look at this guy, I showed you this last week. This is their big calendar, right? You can see here that on the calendar, even on the circle, you can see 4 big points, right? And these big points are the quadrants of the year. And the quadrants of the year were divided up more or less along the same lines as Ometeotl supposedly broke up the 4 quadrants of the earth. And one of the ways that they would designate the passage of month to month, or section of time to section of time, had to do with which particular stars were at the highest point in the sky. And they kept a very detailed calendar because they knew the progression of the planets and the rotation of the Earth and things like that. And they applied this to the ordering of the universe as done by the gods. They didn't have a clock like a solar clock or anything like that, like a disc or a hourglass or something, but they had hours. They had divisions of the day. And what's interesting here, getting back to, even to this mythological viewpoint, each hour of the day was said to have been ruled over by a specific god. So, like as an example, the first hour of the day when the sun was rising, that first hour was overseen by the god of fire. There's this guy named Shika. These words are just messy. Shwitakutli. Shwitakutli was the god of fire, and he had the hour of the dawn. And then, like midnight, in the middle of the night, at like the dead hour, that was ruled over by the god of the dead. So that was like his hour. And what's really interesting here is like the hour right before the god of the dead was ruled over by the goddess of waterways and streams, because in their cosmology, when you died, you went over a stream to pass into the underworld. So their story goes like you're going to the other side of Earth by crossing this stream, and even in their hours every day, if you're approaching the hour of the dead, you go past the hour of the streams. So they have this interesting like synergy of mythology with the progression of days and months and weeks. These words are pretty tough. I know them, but I have to stop myself and say them slowly sometimes, because if I naturally speak pretty rapidly. So I can say stuff like Metlantlekutli, but I have to stop sometimes and go, which one was that? Oh, that's Shwitekutli. Or I said it wrong. Shwitekutli. Shwitekutli. And it's something that you just pick up, right? We're going to talk about Omeokon and Omekutli and all these people and all this stuff later on. It's fun stuff. Okay, I don't have the dog cam up. Where is it? Oh, it's up here. All right, let me turn this on. Not a fan of the fire god making you wake up that early. The hardest part about going to Mexico City is pronouncing the streets or telling the cab where to take you. Yeah. I bet. A lot of the stuff in Mexico City is named with Nahua words. Which is, I mean, it's because it's on top of that. It's on top of Tenochtitlan, the city of the Aztec. That was their capital. Tlaloc. So it's Tlat. That's the first. Tlatelolco. Tlatelolco. And it's honestly like, if you break it down into syllables, it makes it a lot easier, because the biggest issue that we have visually reading these words is that the progression of the letters doesn't usually follow the standard progression of letters in English. But if you break them down into small pieces, you can say them a lot easier. So, Tlatelolco. I said that wrong. Tlatelolco. Tlatelolco. All right. I guess I should just turn the dog camera on and leave it on. But I don't, because I get here and I forget that people care about the dog. Not that you shouldn't care about the dog, but I just forget that people like looking at the dog. All right. Let's get this started up. All right. Got that going. All right. Now we must call the dog. So give me just a second. I suspect she was sleeping because I hear her doing her I just woke up thing getting off the couch because she does this like snorting thing where she's like and then has to like shake. So I think she's probably waking up and then potentially looking for a toy to come back here. I guess we're just waiting on the puppy. Maybe I underestimate the burial prevalence. Okay, wait. Question: why is death related to the underworld if burial is not common everywhere? Um, because you die and you fall down. As weird as that sounds. All right, let's go to Puppy Cam. Come here. Come here. Come see me. The people want to see you. Oh, she has her chicken. This is her favorite toy. Hello. Where are you going? What are you doing? Oh, she was asleep. My wife does report that she was in fact asleep. So we're gonna get an itchy butt. You wanna come here? No? Is that it? Is that all we're getting? Yep, and just like that, she was gone. Oh, the dog. I guess I can get rid of Ometeotl. So, highly developed system. Lots of stuff going into the days and the nights. They did have a calendar that was 365 days long. But what's interesting is that they also knew the duration of the progression of Venus through the sky. The morning star, or whatever you want to call it, was actually the severed head of one of their goddesses. We'll get to that in a bit. But they knew how long it took for Venus to get around, and they would use the relationship between the progression of Venus and the solar calendar that they had to correct the solar calendar, so they knew that it wasn't exactly 365 days long. Like, to in our world we have leap year, and we just add a day every every 4 years to even out the 0.23-ish days, right? But they would end up using the correlation between the sun progression and Venus to go like, we need to straighten up here. And they would also have festivals that would kind of like mark demarcations between time periods so that they could kind of adjust the calendar if they needed to. How is falling down the leading factor to the underworld? You literally fall down. If I kill you, you fall down. You don't float up into the air. That's literally the connection. If I leave you sitting there, your body degrades and becomes dirt. So you go down. That's literally the most basic thing that I could tell you about it, right? Now, I'm not trying to be flippant or rude or anything, but like that's it. It seems like it should be more convoluted and more, like there should be this great story about like falling down means, but no, it's literally just like. We're sometimes very, very clever, and other times it's just Jimmy fell down, his spirit went into the ground in the underworld. That's kind of just where it went, right? Caves go down, and caves are scary, right? If you go down into the cave, you don't always come back up. So you're going down into the underworld, so you're dead. Lots of caves in central Mexico. But yeah, sometimes it's just you fall down. And if we died and there was some visible thing about us moving up, that would be different. But this is an interesting contrast when you look at some cultures who don't necessarily believe in the same type of afterlife experience where like you do the sky burials in Tibet where the birds eat you and this carries your spirit into the sky. but that's sort of like returning to where it came from, right? We could talk about this specifically with the Aztec, like their life cycle. If you look at where their soul supposedly started, so in the cosmology, so the word cosmology just means like how they viewed the arrangement of the universe, and different accounts are going to tell you different things. Some of them are going to say that there were 12 layers of heaven, 12 layers of earth, and 12 layers of the underworld. Some are going to say 9. Some are going to say 7. It doesn't necessarily matter too terribly much to what we're talking about, but it's also, again, one of these indicative things of what time period you're talking about and to which groups you're talking about. It gets bigger kind of as it goes, where we are kind of making more room for stuff, I guess. I don't know. But the idea here is there is the highest level of existence, the highest of the high heavens. This is a place called Ameokan, and this is where Ometeotl abides. And that's where all of the souls of humans, or the spirits of humans, originate. And when you are born, your soul like descends through the heavens and enters the baby at the moment of birth and stays with your physical body until you die. And when you die, your spirit kind of wanders around the different layers of the earth for, depending on which one you look at, a varying period of time. Some of them are saying like 7 days. Some of them say 4 years, but wanders around a bit on Earth prior to moving across a 9-fold stream to get to the underworld. And the lowest level of the underworld is where the average person's soul goes to rest. This is a place called Chikunalmitlan. Chikunalmitlan. It's the lowest level of the underworld. Chikunalmitlan. That's a fun one to say. But anyway, so they had this idea that the soul just kind of goes down to hang out. And that's kind of just the way that they viewed the world. Did they write? So I could show you here. Like they used hieroglyphics. If you look at a lot of these symbols, have like word meanings and stuff like that. It's not a script, right? So it's not like an alphabet like we have. It's a hieroglyphic writing that would have various meanings and interpretations based on the location and inclusion of certain elements and radicals, etc. But pretty cool stuff. All right. I guess we could start talking about some of these big gods. I guess we could start with... we talked about this guy a little bit on Thursday. We could talk about this guy. This is Huitzilopochtli. And Huitzilopochtli is one of the more interesting of the gods. This is a particularly interesting version of him because he's got both of his feet. In some versions of the impressions or pictures of him, he only has 1 foot. But this one is obviously different than that one, and there's a reason for that. So Huitzilopochtli was the god of war and the god of warriors. And he's got this really great story. Well, I mean, it's an interesting story. This is his mom. His mom's name is Coatlicue. And Coatlicue is an interesting individual because she is basically a serpent woman. Her name means like skirt of snakes. And you can see here, like, her skirt is actually made of snakes. So Coatlicue is an interesting goddess. She's the goddess of birth and the family, but she's also kind of like the the goddess of like protecting you when you die, which is kind of interesting. Like her necklace here, if you look at it, is hands and hearts, and like they're severed hands and ripped out hearts, right? So she's wearing these around, which is kind of disturbing if you think about it. But you know, it's an Aztec god. They're very highly likely to be blood situations here. But anyway, so Coatlicue was up on top of a mountain. And didn't they glorify human shapes like other cultures? If you're talking about, like, did they draw human pictures like the Greeks did with some magical ratio? No. I mean, they obviously have sculpture and stuff like that that uses human stuff in it. A lot of the masks of their god of death are actually made out of human skulls, and they'll like cover them over with gemstones or obsidian, and they'll make these really like shiny iron pyrite eyeballs, which are like mirrors that will shine them up, and it's wicked cool stuff. But anyway, imagine showing up on a first date dressed like that, the snake skirt and the severed hands. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. So Coatlicue had a lot of children. So she had 400 sons, and they're known collectively as the Sinson-Witsnawa. So these are the 400 sons of Coatlicue. And she had a daughter named Coyolxauhqui. And so she's got 401 children. And she's so Coatlicue goes up to the top of this mountain. She's praying to the gods. And kind of from nowhere, this bundle of hummingbird feathers like falls out of the sky. Just like falls out of the sky. And she goes, oh, that's kind of cool. And she makes the decision that as the goddess of childbearing, that she's going to kind of foster this thing. So she takes the bundle of hummingbird feathers and she puts it either in her shirt. Some people say she holds it to her breast. Some versions say that she kind of tucks it under one of her breasts. But anyway, whatever she does with this bundle of hummingbird feathers, she immediately becomes pregnant with her 402nd child. Well, this doesn't go over so great with her daughter, Coyolxauhqui, and it doesn't go over very well at all with Sinson-Witsnawa, the 400 sons of hers, because they all fear like she's going to love this kid more than she loves them, or somehow this is going to be some sort of special kid or something like that. So her daughter, Coyolxauhqui, decides that she's going to make a plot. And she's going to basically either kill her mom or wait until her mother's giving birth and then immediately kill the baby. And she gets all of the brothers, all 400 of the brothers, in on this. And she's got this big, elaborate scheme. So they go to confront Coatlicue, but as soon as they do this, the baby had been tipped off. One of the brothers felt bad about killing his unborn brother and had somehow gotten a message to the unborn fetus that there was a plot afoot. So when the brothers and the sister show up to kill the baby, he pops out fully formed and decked out for battle. And this is Huitzilopochtli. And Huitzilopochtli progresses to killing all of his brothers and chopping their body parts up and throwing them up into the sky. And these form all of the stars of the sky. So if you look in the sky and you see stars, that is a part of one of the bodies of Huitzilopochtli. Well, not the one that tipped him off. He spares some of them, but most of them get get chopped up into little pieces. He also decides that his sister, Koyoshalki's got to go, and he chops her up, and he puts her head on top of this big mountain. And her head becomes basically the morning star, which is like the Venus thing. Now, what's really interesting about Koyalshaki is that we found this really fascinating, kind of gruesome, but really interesting depiction of her. This is a depiction of Koyalshaki after Huitzilopochtli has chopped her into little bits. So her body parts are not connected, right? So like here's her severed arm, and here's her severed head and her severed legs. This was discovered in Mexico City not too terribly long ago, back in the 90s. But it's really kind of crazy that the people of the Aztec took this story so specifically that they would have depicted Koyalshaki literally in pieces. It was just like that big of a deal, right? Like, oh, we've got to make a big, relief carving of Koyalshaki. How should we do that? Oh, we should chop her up into pieces in the picture. It's just crazy. It's kind of crazy stuff. Let me catch up with chat. It's interesting because the Egyptians were keen to see their king as divine, so they must have thought the human form was at least worth glorifying. Not necessarily psychical. Just because you think your king is divine doesn't mean that their body is cool. Aztec kings had to do a lot of blood stuff. Aztecs were really big on sacrificing people, sacrificing blood. They would have... There are multiple instances for different gods where people would get chosen to be like the yearly sacrifice. In one of these situations, and this doesn't directly relate to Huitzilopochtli, but in one of these situations, they would find a young boy who was like potentially pre-pubescent or right at puberty, maybe going through his growth spurt, and they would sort of like pick this guy as the like official representative of this god, and they for a year would just give this guy whatever he wanted. They would parade him around. He got to be the first person served at all the big events. He got to sit at the front of all the big games and sporting events and stuff like that. And then at the end of the year, they would kill him and immediately pick a new boy that would be the new incarnation of this god on Earth. This is Tezcatlipoca, who we'll talk about here in just a second. But yeah, like, so they did a lot of that stuff like that. In one of these situations, they'd pick somebody that got married to 4 women, and that person was like basically treated with everything that he would have ever wanted, but then he and all 4 of the women got killed. Right? It's just there are lots of these little scenarios where it's not really you, it's like dropped out. Super. Yeah, obviously my my internet works, right? Poca. Weird looking guy. I don't know why I said Huitzilopochtli lost his foot. Tezcatlipoca lost his foot. I don't know why I got that confused. That's like straightforward and basic, because you can see that Tezcatlipoca is missing his foot. Let me tell you the story about the foot. All right. So Tezcatlipoca was one of the 4 gods that originally gets made by Ometeotl. He's one of the 4 quadrant lords, I guess you could call it that way. And he and his brother, Quetzalcoatl, kept trying to make stuff. They kept trying to make earth and land and people. But there was this giant crocodile, this celestial cosmic sized crocodile that kept eating everything. So they would make land, and then the crocodile would show up and eat the land. Or they would make people, and the crocodile would show up and eat all the people. So Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl come up with this idea that they're going to catch the alligator, or the crocodile rather. But the crocodile's pretty smart, so he's not just going to like swim up to these gods. So Tezcatlipoca sticks his foot down in the water and says, like, this is going to be bait. So the crocodile sees the foot in the water and is like, oh, I'm going to eat that. So he goes over and he bites Tezcatlipoca's foot off, but in the process of doing that, they grab him and they kill him. And they butcher up the crocodile, and this is basically where all of the land on Earth comes from. It's the remains of the cosmic crocodile that got chopped up. I don't know why I'm getting so many spam bots lately, but that's like the 5th or 6th spam bot in the last couple of streams. You assumed it's because your son's computer was cobbled together with parts from the scrap shelf. No, Lopta, it's just my crappy internet. Have I considered monitoring network traffic and getting some cactographs or something and turn into... I don't know if I have the money to sue them. They're supposed to be sending somebody out sometime this week to run the entire lines. That was supposed to actually happen today. They were supposed to send somebody out today, but they called me yesterday morning in the middle of my classes, and when I didn't answer the phone, they canceled my appointment with the technician today. So I had to call back yesterday and spend another hour on the phone trying to get them to reinstate my appointment. And based on what I think is going to happen, I think they're going to end up here on Thursday while I'm at work. And I can't really quit work. So, because I'm already going to be out of town for Dragon Con this upcoming weekend. So I've already canceled some classes. I can't cancel all of the classes. So they're going to end up showing up here and hopefully figuring out what's going on. Completely down. I'm so tired of this. It's so frustrating. Anyway, let's get through this stream. So, Tezcatlipoca, this guy, is the is actually the god of changing, and he gets associated a lot with things changing, like day changing to night or light changing to death. You see shrines of him set up at crossroads, and he's also oddly the god of hurricanes. At one point, he summons a hurricane to kill a whole bunch of people that liked Quetzalcoatl. He's just not a cool dude. He's a very, very old god in the Aztec pantheon. He is probably one of the original Mexica gods that's like way, way, way back at the very, very beginning of their world when they first started coming up on stuff. And he shows up because he's in so many of the stories. Again, he's one of the creators, and he's one of the creators in a lot of the different stories. So even when you see stories where stuff happens and it's not the 4 different gods that created or everything, he gets referenced sometimes as the singular creator. He also has a lot of magic. He can show up in different forms because he's the god of changing. So he can show up as Like sometimes he shows up as a wizard or a sorcerer, depending on how you want to call it. Sometimes he shows up as a really, really old guy. That's sort of like just a common nondescript old dude that you wouldn't expect. He can also shape change into a jaguar. And he's just a really very fascinating deity here. He is almost always going to be at odds with Quetzalcoatl. They have a very long-running, very full of animosity feud. This is something that has been examined anthropologically. The leading theory here is that Tezcatlipoca was one of the original Mexica gods that came south when they migrated to the south. And because the god Quetzalcoatl was so important to the Toltecs, that when the Mexica people and the Toltecs began to fight, the stories of their gods fighting kind of came out of that experience, right? So Quetzalcoatl is almost certainly one of the original patron deities of the Toltecs, and as the Aztec conquered the Toltec, this could be very well one of the instances of why Quetzalcoatl is so frequently at the end or the butt of Tezcatlipoca's actions. So you can see some like real world here affecting the made up stuff. You're hearing so much Warhammer lore with different names. I mean, they may have copied and pasted this stuff, man. I don't actually know how they came up with most of the lore for that. But it wouldn't surprise me if they just found the mythology and changed the names. It's a pretty common trick. I don't do it because I think it's a little bit hokey. But, I mean, C.S. Lewis did it, so what do I know, right? Anyway, so Tezcatlipoca is one of the big four, with Huitzilopochtli, and again, this guy. This guy, again, is Quetzalcoatl. He's one of the big four. He probably, like I just said, started off as a Toltec god and was then sort of later co-opted into the larger Aztec pantheon. Are you not entertained? Are you streaming me? What up, Eris? And 30 friends. How's it going? What's up, Volt Sparkle? Dun 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 dun. Definitely more a Kiki than a Boba. What up, Vipers? How's it going, man? Welcome in, everybody. If you don't know who I am, I'm Shane. I teach history and sociology at college. On stream, I usually talk history, but we're doing viewer request night tonight, which is something that my viewers picked. So last Thursday, we did a stream on Aztec history, and when we got to the point of picking a viewer request, we voted, and the viewers picked that they wanted to do Aztec mythology. So we've been talking about Rexler. Thanks so much for popping in, and thanks so much for the follow. Much appreciated. Echo Frost, how's it going? Good to see you. Nick Slottle is here. Lots of folks here. Pretty sure that everybody in my chat should know Aristotle, but if you don't, you should follow this guy. Good friend, fellow teacher, really, really smart dude. Has a PhD in philosophy, teaches philosophy, ancient Greek philosophy, stuff like that. We overlap a lot on the stuff that we like. Metalhead, lover of horror movies. Go change your world and hang out in Aristotle's chat. Where do deleted words go? It all costs money. I don't know. That's a fair question. Lopta wishes that they could afford to go back to college. Do you want the piece of paper or do you want the knowledge? Right? If you want the knowledge, you can find the knowledge. Right? If you want the piece of paper, unfortunately, I can't do very much to help you there unless you come take my classes. Cool Whip, what's up? How's it going? What is the philosophy of getting a PhD in the contemporary economy? That's a fair question. I wouldn't be able to answer that as accurately as Eris, but I can tell you that a PhD in philosophy right now is a hard hoe to row unless you're going to go into ethics, and specifically you're going to go into technology ethics like AI ethics. If you can get into that, you can probably find a job, but teaching with a PhD in philosophy, hard to do. Hard to do. You want the knowledge. Yeah. You have a degree, that and $5 will buy you fancy coffee. You just miss learning. Well, see, that's what we're here for, Lopta, right? That's why I do what I do. And let me plug this. And I might actually need to update that link now because we've got a new website. But I'm a part of a group here on Twitch called the Knowledge Fellowship, and there are almost 100 people that I can think of that stream educational content. It's not just me. I think I'm the only person that does history like I do history. There are other people that are interested in history that might do stuff like play games and talk about history. Melissa in Denial does some stuff with Egyptology, so like kind of history-esque, but a lot more like I do, where she does planned talks and discussions and stuff like that. But I mean, Aristotle can teach you philosophy. We've got a friend in the chat, Noger, that can teach you philosophy. I could teach you history and sociology. You go hang out with Rocket Sage, that could teach you geology. There are people that do math and science and computer programming, and there's just a ton of people. And I think that link, I'm pretty sure it still works. Yeah. But it's something that is great. There are a lot of people that you can go hang out with and learn stuff for free, right? Because you can come hang out with me as much as you want, as long as I'm on stream. And, you know, it is what it is. Noker isn't real. You also wouldn't mind learning something that gets you a better job. Yeah, see, now that's where it's going to be tough, right? Because I can't give you any credentials, so I don't have any way to help you on that one. You find a guy on YouTube who's going through history year by year, and he'll probably end up with more followers and more money than I have. But that's okay. I wish him the best. Degree will get you more money. Interesting. Interesting. Isn't there data that proves a degree gets you a better job? I mean, if you look at stuff like what is a degree going to get you, you're statistically way more likely to make more money over the course of your life. People with bachelor's degrees, on average, tend to make about $1 million more than people that don't have bachelor degrees, and that increases exponentially with masters and specialists and PhDs. But the problem that we have when we look at stuff like that is it's all kind of skewed, right? Because a lot of the highest earners in our current economy don't have degrees at all. So you're putting those people like a lot of the people that are professional athletes won't finish college and don't get a degree, but they make millions and millions of dollars a year. And then they're put in the same data set as people that don't finish high school. So the average for that is then skewed pretty heavily up. So it's quite likely that the average person actually makes significantly more from going to college and getting a degree. But if you subtracted things like the recording artists that never finish college that make millions and millions of dollars, the people that are professional athletes, the people that are, TikTok influencers that make more money than I do with no degree. And I'm not shaming any of these people or saying anything negative about them. I'm just saying that, like, the data points that we have are not necessarily super duper accurate. It does depend on the degree and the job, exactly. You have an associate's degree and in your mid-40s and you work part-time delivery for Pizza Hut. I mean, if it makes you the money, it makes you the money, right? 4,000 subscribers already, but then he has more successful reaction channel with 160. Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to do reaction content. That has no interest to me at all. I love that my degree got me the more money, even the comfortable career, but it doesn't make you the money. I feel you. If you have an associate's degree, universities now are getting way more interested in treating those like a completed first 2 years of a degree. And there are a lot of universities now that are creating programs that will basically let you transfer your associate's degree directly into a 4 year degree so that you could get 2 more years of college and get a bachelor's without having to worry about jumping through all of the hoops of like core classes and stuff like that. So you might look into that. And a lot of universities are actually trying to